The latest 2025 horror thriller, The Bayou, has arrived with a terrifying impact. Late at night, a group of police officers quietly infiltrated a factory, hoping to bust the drug dealers inside all at once. But a sudden noise startled everyone, sending them fleeing in all directions. In a desperate attempt to destroy evidence, one of the dealers dumped raw materials directly into the river, and the purple liquid flowed along the current, eventually seeping into the nearby bayou. The alligators living in the swamp weren't spared. When the liquid entered their skin, some of their genes began to mutate. Kyle, a top biology student, had recently lost her brother Jamie, who died heroically while fighting off criminals. To give Jamie a proper farewell, Kyle planned to scatter his ashes in the Florida Keys. She had confided this only to her best friend Alice, but Alice brought along two new people, Malika and her boyfriend Sam. What was meant to be a quiet trip for two became a party of four, leaving Kyle feeling uneasy. Noticing Kyle's discomfort, Alice quickly explained that she had sold her beloved car to help her mother pay off debts and had no choice but to find others to carpool with. Seeing the two new companions greet her warmly, Kyle reluctantly got in. The drive to Florida was dull, but thanks to Alice's endless chatter, the mood wasn't too awkward. After spending the night in a motel, Malika surprised everyone the next morning by driving them to an airport, where a private jet awaited. It turned out Malika had secretly registered them for a flight to save time, and besides them, 5 other passengers were also on board. They thought this trip would be smooth and fun, but soon after takeoff, one man kept making phone calls nonstop. Despite repeated warnings from Kyle and others, he wouldn't stop. Annoyed by the noise, another passenger finally stood up, removed his hat, and walked over to confront him. At that very moment, the plane shook violently. He lost his balance and slammed into the cabin wall, instantly knocked out. It turned out that Engine 1 had malfunctioned, and Captain Frank was instantly thrown into a panic as he tried to regain control of the aircraft. But the emergency backup, Engine 2, also began to show signs of fire. Everyone on board was stunned, and for a moment, terror spread throughout the cabin. With radio communications down, the plane was forced to make an emergency landing. The massive impact flipped the aircraft onto one side and knocked Kyle unconscious. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself in a river. Turning her head, she saw the other passengers had already made it to shore. Still shaken by the crash, Kyle struggled to get out of the water, but with the help of Alice and Sam, she finally made it to dry land. Staring at the wreckage, the survivors couldn't help but feel worried. How would they contact the outside world? One passenger named Zoe was severely bleeding from her leg, and to treat the wound, Kyle and Captain Frank used a belt to stop the bleeding. At the same time, Frank realized that the co-pilot Ray was missing, so he stepped into the river and shouted his name, but there was no response. The group's mood sank to a new low. The plane had crash-landed in the Florida Bayou, the largest biological wetland system in the area, filled with countless aggressive alligators. If they couldn't get help soon, things would turn deadly. Just then, Kyle noticed something alarming. The plane hadn't been registered with air traffic control, meaning the black box hadn't been activated. Hoping for an external rescue was like hoping for a miracle. Their only chance now was self-rescue. Luckily, Frank knew how to navigate the terrain, so everyone quickly began gathering any usable supplies. The man found his phone among the wreckage, and right then, Alice noticed a rustling sound coming from the nearby grass. Following the sound, she discovered several intact alligator eggs lying on the ground. For a group low on resources, this was an unexpected surprise, so she stuffed a few eggs into her pocket. As Frank was organizing the supplies, Alice suddenly noticed a figure standing in the river. Frank turned to look and saw Ray, who had somehow emerged from the water. He and Kyle immediately jumped into the river, trying to pull Ray to shore. But before they could reach him, a massive alligator with its jaws wide open suddenly appeared behind Ray. The next second, Ray's body was thrashing in the water, the bloody scene sending everyone on the bank into a panic. Seeing this, Frank and Kyle quickly swam back to shore. Kyle told the others that alligators don't usually attack humans like this, which meant there must be a nest nearby. They had unknowingly intruded on the alligator's territory. The top priority now was to leave this area. According to Frank, they had to reach the highest point in the forest as quickly as possible to get a better understanding of their surroundings. Just as the group moved out, the alligator slowly crawled back toward its nest. When it saw that only one egg remained, it let out a deep, menacing growl. Unaware, The survivors in the jungle had no idea that danger was now silently approaching. They walked from daylight into darkness and finally reached an area far from the water, deciding to make do and rest there for the night. Perhaps it was the exhaustion from the day, but it didn't take long before everyone fell fast asleep. In the middle of the night, the man got up to relieve himself and accidentally dropped his phone. As the phone suddenly rang, he panicked and scrambled to find it. But before he could even answer, an alligator hiding in the jungle lunged out and bit his head off on the spot. By the next morning, the group gasped in horror at the gruesome scene. Normally, alligators wouldn't actively attack humans, but the one they encountered was aggressively hostile. Frank, who had seen plenty in his life, suddenly recalled an old legend about the alligators around Florida. Hearing Frank's story, the group felt a chill run down their spines. Just when they didn't know what to do next, Kyle spotted a small wooden cabin standing not far away and suggested they use it as a vantage point to plan their next move. Everyone agreed with the idea, and soon they arrived at a clearing. But Kyle immediately sensed something was wrong and quickly told everyone to stop moving because there was more than one alligator nearby. Unaware of the danger, Lisa had somehow wandered to the very front of the group. Kyle calmly told her to stay put, then turned to discuss their options with the others. No sooner had she spoken than an alligator suddenly dragged Lisa into the nearby bushes. Almost simultaneously, another alligator appeared behind them. Now surrounded, the group panicked and ran forward in terror. Alice tripped and fell, but thanks to her quick reflexes, she narrowly avoided the gator's massive jaws. They pushed through the dense trees and finally made it inside the wooden cabin, but the alligators were still in pursuit. Zoe, whose leg was already injured, got caught. An alligator clamped down on her calf. Everyone inside the cabin grabbed her and pulled with all their might, but the gator refused to let go and continued pushing toward the doorway. Malika and Sam grabbed hammers and struck the alligator on the head. The blow managed to save Zoe, but it also enraged the beast even more. It began slamming itself against the door with relentless force. Those standing by the entrance struggled to hold the door shut. At that moment, terrified, Malika chose not to help. Instead, she kicked hard at the wall, trying to find a way to escape. With the weight of the alligator pushing on the door, no one had time to worry about Malika. They threw themselves against the entrance, desperately trying to buy just one more second to survive. Fortunately, at the last moment, they managed to shut the wooden door using heavy objects nearby. A short while later, the alligator finally stopped attacking, and everyone let out a collective sigh of relief. But when they heard Lisa's screams echoing from outside, sadness swept over them, because right now, they could barely protect themselves, let alone rescue anyone else. That evening, Kyle once again helped Zoe bandage her wound. Strangely, after giving up its attack, the alligator outside began to turn on its own kind, one by one. Glowing green eyes lurked silently in the darkness, as if trying to trap the group inside until they died. To stay safe, the group decided to take turns keeping watch through the night. After a day of extreme stress and exhaustion, Kyle unexpectedly dreamed of her late brother Jamie. In the dream, Jamie had died while trying to save someone, taken hostage by criminals. As Kyle shakily reached for a gun, the quick-acting thug shot Jamie dead before she could do anything. Kyle jolted awake, drenched in sweat, haunted by the image of her brother lying in a pool of blood. By early dawn, Sam had found a map in one of the drawers and approached Kyle to plan their next move. After analyzing it together, they discovered a large building marked on the map, most likely a factory, just 3 miles beyond a nearby river. They hoped they might find help there. However, Frank said he had never seen any structure in that area before and suggested it could just be someone's random doodle. If the factory didn't actually exist, it would mean they'd wasted 4 miles going in the wrong direction. And with the forest full of lurking danger, none of them could afford such a gamble. But a more immediate problem loomed over the group: food scarcity. As everyone pondered their options, Malika suddenly placed all the blame on Kyle. She even tried to grab Jamie's ashes, and the captain had to step in and stop her before the confrontation escalated. Soon after, Frank called for a vote. Everyone except Malika chose to leave the cabin and take the risk. Better to try and fight for survival than sit and wait for death. Before they left, Kyle gave one crucial warning. If you lock eyes with a gator, never turn your back. You must run forward in a zigzag because these creatures can chase prey at speeds of 24 miles per hour. And if one bites down on you, don't try to fight back. With 80 razor-sharp teeth and jaws strong enough to crush skulls and even steel, resistance is useless. But they aren't without weaknesses. Their eyes and noses are the most vulnerable parts, but only on land. Realizing how serious the situation was, Malika gave up her plan to stay and reluctantly joined the group. However, Zoe's leg was getting worse. Just as the group prepared to rest, Malika insisted on pressing forward, showing no concern for Zoe's pain. Her cold-heartedness stirred anger among the others, but Zoe didn't argue. After a brief rest, she decided to move on with help from her husband. Soon, they heard the sound of running water. Realizing a river was close, they followed the sound and found the one marked on the map. Because it had rained the night before, the gators were likely hiding to regulate their body temperature. It was the perfect time to escape. Kyle suggested building a raft to cross the river. After some quick discussion, the group divided up tasks and got to work. While they were out gathering logs, Alice noticed a strange noise from the grass. Curious, she pushed through the foliage and came face to face with an alligator. Recalling the death and destruction caused by the creatures, she picked up a stick and stabbed it right in the eye. As the beast let out a chilling shriek, Alice turned and calmly walked back toward the others. With everyone's help, they soon completed a simple raft. As they began crossing the river, Sam returned to the shore to grab a bag and came face to face with another gator. Seeing the danger, Zoe, silent until now, watched the water calmly and made a decision. After a heartfelt farewell to her husband, she jumped into the river, sacrificing herself to save the others. As watched his wife disappear beneath the surface, he was consumed by unbearable grief. The raft finally passed out of the alligator's territory, but no one cheered. A vibrant life had been lost before their eyes, and sorrow settled over the group like a heavy fog. In this vast and unknown bayou, what new dangers still awaited them? After drifting for a while, they finally spotted a house. The bullet casings scattered nearby revealed it was once the site of the police raid on the drug traffickers. Ignoring the captain's warning, Malika rushed ahead to explore, and the others quickly grabbed flashlights and followed. Inside, the walls were stained with blood. To search for a radio or signs of help, Frank split the group into 2 teams. Once the teams were organized, Frank used the opportunity to send Alice off on a search. Then followed Malika upstairs. Turns out Frank had long grown sick of Malika's selfishness. Meanwhile, inside the house, Kyle, Sam, and the others discovered traces of a strange blue powder. They suspected that this substance might be the very cause behind the alligator's violent behavior. As they continued exploring, they were shocked to find another survivor still alive. Elsewhere, Frank could no longer hold back his fury and pushed Malika down the stairs, intending to kill her. Terrified by the threat of death, Malika instinctively grabbed onto the edge of the staircase, narrowly avoiding the fall. She immediately began begging Frank for mercy. Seeing her in tears, Frank hesitated, a flicker of sympathy flashing through his mind. But just as he reached out to pull her up, an alligator appeared out of nowhere and bit him clean off. Malika screamed at the top of her lungs as she witnessed the horrific scene. Thankfully, Kyle and the others, having heard the commotion, arrived just in time to save her from falling. Just moments earlier, the dying survivor Kyle and Sam had found had used his last breath to warn them there's an alligator in the house. And with that, he died from blood loss. Kyle and Sam rushed to inform the captain, but they were a moment too late. Having survived by a thread, Malika finally realized the consequences of her actions. She apologized to Kyle for everything she had done, and the two made peace at last. After regaining their composure, the group pushed forward and entered another house. But the door behind them suddenly slammed shut. They quickly switched on their flashlights and were horrified to see that the room was filled with alligators. Oddly, the creatures weren't reacting to the noise. That's when Kyle noticed something astonishing. There was a landline phone not far from the nearest alligator. Hope surged through the group, but crossing that room without waking the beasts would be nearly impossible. Holding their breath, they crept forward. Suddenly, an alligator's tail swung and struck Kyle's leg. She immediately covered her mouth in fear, but luckily the alligator didn't notice. They kept moving until Sam's foot slipped. He clenched his jaw, trying to stay balanced, but lost control and fell sideways. The noise woke the resting gators. Hearing their hisses, Sam panicked and forgot Kyle's warning. He turned his head, and the next second, an alligator clamped down on him, tearing into his body. His screams pierced the air as the awakened gators went into a frenzy. The rest of the group ran back and barricaded the door. Meanwhile, Kyle had reached the phone. She managed to call for help and reported their location. Now all they could do was wait for rescue. Then they discovered another door in the room. Thinking it was an escape route, they opened it, only to find another hidden alligator inside. At that moment, Alice suddenly remembered something. Under everyone's stunned gaze, she slowly pulled the stolen alligator eggs from her bag, hoping to use them to distract the creature. Kyle cautiously moved closer. Everyone held their breath, but just as the gator sniffed the eggs, it lunged at Alice instead. Caught off guard, Alice was bitten on the arm. She struggled fiercely and finally managed to break free. As the alligator prepared to devour her, Kyle picked up a pistol and shot at it. but the bullets did little damage. If anything, they only made the beast more aggressive. In desperation, Kyle fired again, finally hitting a sensitive spot and forcing the alligator to pause. The group seized the moment to pull Alice to safety, but they were now out of ammunition. To protect everyone else, Kyle grabbed a knife and stabbed it into the gator's eye. After a few violent clashes, the alligator threw her aside. Disoriented, Kyle spotted a pool of flammable toxic liquid behind her. She knocked it over, grabbed a lighter, and set it ablaze. The room was instantly engulfed in flames, and the vicious alligator was finally burned alive. The group escaped through the exit just in time, and the rescue helicopter tracking their coordinates soon arrived. The nightmare was finally over. In the end, Kyle fulfilled her wish by scattering Jamie's ashes over the Florida Keys. Through this journey, she was finally able to let go of the pain of her brother's death. The moment she picked up the gun and chose to save her companions, she made the same brave choice her brother once did. In the face of life and death, surrender was never the answer. Only by fighting back could they carve out a path to survival.